Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our October Science Speaker Series at the Maria Mitchell Association. My name is Janelle Gurley, and I'm the Director of Science and Programs here at the MMA. And before we get started and welcome Morgan Raith, our featured speaker this evening, I'd like to give a huge thank you to Bank of America, our lead sponsor of our Science Speaker Series that allows this presentation series to be accessible to learners of all ages and helping us support our mission to create a lifelong journey of learning for all. This evening, I have the esteemed pleasure to welcome Morgan Raith in her presentation of visual design for natural science. Before I turn it over to Morgan this evening, I'd like to share her brief bio with you and as well as her presentation this evening. Morgan will share an overview of her design background, creative process, and details of her island-centered interpretive and educational projects. Having grown up on Nantucket, Morgan appreciates the role design and storytelling play in sharing the island's rich history and natural wonders. She is excited to share her unique approach to visual communications and problem solving. Morgan is an artist, designer, and creative strategist specializing in scientific communication. She provides creative direction for clients in marine technology, natural sciences, education, and conservation. Morgan also works closely with scientists, engineers, teachers, and cultural experts to transform complex information into accessible visual content for various audiences in different settings. Her portfolio includes self-guided tours, interpretive signage, scientific illustrations, visual guides, digital storytelling, and exhibit design. And without any delay, I'd like to welcome Morgan this evening, my dear friend. Welcome, Morgan. How are you?
Hello, Janelle. Thank you so much for that very, very kind introduction. I'm honored to be here with Maria Mitchell today.
We are so esteemed to have you, and thank you for joining us. And I'm going to turn it over to you. Please grab the screen share. And just for everyone joining us this evening, thank you for joining us. And if you have any questions throughout Morgan's presentation, please feel free to either raise your hands or pop questions into the Q&A, and we will have a dedicated discussion piece toward the end. But if there's something that pops into your brain that you just can't wait to have answered, please definitely just drop something in the chat or the Q&A for us. Thank you, Morgan.
Thank you. Yeah. Hello, everyone. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. I am, yes, going to hopefully only talk for about 40 minutes and then leave the rest of the hour for discussion. I would love for everyone to participate as they wish. So welcome to Visual Design for Natural Science. Visual design covers a little bit more than just graphic design, which you might be familiar with, but includes kind of this whole visual experience that we might have when encountering information or space. And then natural science really encapsulates study of the whole physical world. So I'm very lucky that my work has gotten to touch on many different subjects. You'll find I'm predominantly marine science or marine technology focused, or some of the projects I'm going to share are. But I get to work with the whole natural world. So I'm very excited to share some of that with you today. I'll do a little bit about my background and talk a little bit about where I'm from. I'm from Nantucket. I'm very grateful that I've been able to experience that place throughout my life and benefit from many of the unique and incredible programming there, such as Maria Mitchell. But I'm most comfortable in the water. So these are some examples of some of the things I like to do in my free time. And it's really the ocean and our waterways is the space that I take the most inspiration from. And yeah, so I grew up on Nantucket. I was very lucky to spend part of my childhood on the Central Coast of California. I went to school at Middlebury College in Vermont, which, funny enough, Lake Champlain used to be a sea. So I have technically lived by the ocean my whole life. I now live in San Diego with my husband, who happens to be an oceanographer. So that's also really helpful in my line of work and just staying inspired. And it's nice that we get to share those interests. Yeah, so my time at Middlebury, I feel like I want to start there because that's really where I got to take the inspiration that I gained from growing up on Nantucket and appreciating the natural world to really formulating that into an understanding of how I could take that experience and actually transmuted into a professional career. So I was very lucky to study a joint major in architecture and environmental science, which is where I had both lab science and architectural studio courses. So I spent a lot of time thinking about the natural world and how it works, how it functions, learning about how it functions, learning how humans impact natural spaces, and then how we can also impact them positively. And the more that we can learn from the natural spaces that we inhabit, I think the more gently we can walk throughout them. So this is a little graphic that I made way back when in college to kind of illustrate this relationship between trees and then the insects that inhabit them, the birds that eat the insects, and then how that all kind of feeds back into the forest, how this is a big system. I think looking back at this, I would have made it a cycle, but it's linear. It's not linear. So it's fun to look back on work and kind of think about those nuances in communication. This is one of my favorite projects that I made while at school, while I was still at Middlebury College. This is the last project that I ever did. I created a pinhole camera. If you're not familiar with a pinhole camera, it's a really, really old form of picture making where you have a lens and then a translucent medium behind the lens that actually captures what the lens is seeing. And then the image is inverted on that transparent paper. So this is a view inside of a little box that I created, and then the transparent film in front that the image is being projected on through the lens. And this was installed in the middle of campus where anyone could interact with it, kind of stick their head under the little veil that I added to it, and peer around the world and kind of have your perspective challenged a little bit by the fact that the image is inverted. So sorry if I just made you all seasick, but that's the image right side up, flipped in post-processing. And yeah, I feel like this project really encapsulates my desire to make creative things that allow us to interact more meaningfully with the world around us. So yeah, my time in Nantucket, if you are joining us, if you're lucky enough to be joining us from Nantucket, you know how special that place is and how much just inspiration that you can draw from spending time in those spaces. And I was able to go back to Nantucket from a grant I actually received from Middlebury while I was there for a self-guided internship over the summer. And this self-guided internship was my first kind of professional, I'm going to intern for myself and I'm going to pay myself to do this project, where I basically went about interviewing different folks who worked in the marine industry throughout Nantucket. And I wanted to learn more about how ecosystems, health of our ecosystems, or either challenges there may impact their business. And then after doing the interviews and collecting some audio that I edited, I did this exhibit design for sharing out photographs that I took, or also had my friend Dan LeMaitre capture for this project. So we worked together on that to create the imagery, and then I created all these audio pieces that we were able to fortunately put on display downtown. The Odison family very graciously lent me these lobster traps and these mooring chains that I was able to actually install to help house the MP3 players and the headphones. So this was one of my first experiences in exhibit design and curating a space where people would interact with this form of storytelling. And that also encapsulated a website. The website is still up if you'd like to visit it. It's acwatershedproject.org. Yeah, so I'll talk a little bit about my artistic background. I was very fortunate to take a watercolor course when I was 12 at the Artists Association of Nantucket, and I absolutely loved that course. It taught me all of the mechanics of watercolor and how to really utilize different substances, whether it's just water. Sometimes I even use seawater when I'm painting by the beach or something. So it's one of my favorite mediums to just artistically express myself. So I'm not always doing these technical things. Sometimes I'm out sketching or bringing photos back and working on them. These are some examples of some watercolor work that I've done with either photos I've taken or experiences that I've had. Some more kind of lifelike and realistic works, whether it's landscapes or objects. Obviously, all either marine or coastal related. Can't help myself. So this is an example of how I kind of take research into my work, whether it's just purely observational or doing a lot of research necessary for some of the more technical projects I work on. I like this photo series because it's a photograph of a mahi-mahi skin of the side of the fish, and then how I've transmuted it through watercolor in this little kind of vignette, circular vignette of what that looks like. And it's fun to just, even though it might not be super lifelike, just express that visually. This is an example of when I've gone fishing, been lucky enough to go fishing off the shores of Nantucket, and then take photographs of that individual, and then be able to not only enjoy eating it, but also paint it. So that's part of my creative process as well. So moving from my artistic work to some more branded and technical work that I've done and been lucky enough to do in the past few years, while I've lived out here in California and traveling back and forth from the East and West Coast. This is a photograph of the Scripps Pier at Scripps Oceanography here in San Diego, to center us a little bit. And then, yeah, these are some underwater photographs that I've been able to take. So since moving to the West Coast, I've also been able to have the experience of getting an underwater housing for my camera as I've become more comfortable in the water. And so now I actually like to shoot underwater and then take those photos back and utilize them to create artwork, which is really fun. So that kind of leads into some of my digital work. And here's a watercolor expression of that, not quite finished. Yeah, so again, moving into some of the more branded and stylized work that I've done. This was for a project that I was lucky enough to work on that was funded through the National Science Foundation. This was a project we worked on called FishLat, Fisheries Location Assessment Technology. And FishLat was this project where we looked at the economic and ecological viability of offshore oil and gas platform jackets after they've been in the water column for, I think, up to like 50 years. And Amber and Emily, if you're joining, my project partners, please don't. You can chime in later if you have some more technical adjustments to make to what I'm saying. Yeah, so like Janelle said in my introduction, I get to work with experts all of the time. And that's what's really fun, is I don't have to be an expert in the subject matter that I'm working on. I actually get to become like an armchair observer expert, like weekender in all of these different really complex, exciting ideas or cutting edge technology that we're looking at right now, ways to improve our natural world, improve our built environment. And that's part of the joy of what I get to do is getting to work with really smart people and be far from the smartest person in the room, which is one of my favorite things. So yeah, this is a overview of a digital brochure that we created together. So I took all of the complex ideas in this project and then created them in a way that would be more easily understood by someone like me, who's not an expert and hasn't spent their whole career understanding these complex problems. So this is a just example of some social media posts that we worked on to help explain these 6 models of how we were evaluating an individual platform jacket for how much economic and ecological value it may have based on the growth and a bunch of different other factors. So something else I want to talk about is my some techniques that I use to make my work as accessible as possible. So I actually have recently started taking all of the visual work that I do and putting it through a colorblind simulator, which is just, I became interested in this because I spent a great deal of time actually making maps in a position I held previously. And I started thinking about, what are the user groups for this map, and who's looking at this, and who needs to benefit from the spatial information. And obviously those who are visually impaired or who have the need for visual her visual supports. My work is, I'm navigating that right now. Like, how do I make my work accessible for someone who is maybe legally blind or can't see? So I'm exploring ways of actually translating my work and having text to it that actually does some justice to what's being displayed. But this is a step into that space that I'm trying to take in terms of thinking about how accessible my work is, and how accessible these visual means of communication are for all user groups. This is another project I recently did with the Nantucket Land Council, and these are some icons I created for them. And on the left side, you see unaltered colors, and then on the right side, that is a simulation of what someone who is read blind or read weak would be seeing. And so part of how I think these icons are successful is that they do have associative colors, but the image itself is all just black line work, and so it's easier to pull out, hopefully, and so that something can still be gained from these, even if you have an accommodation for whatever visual differences you might have. Yeah, so that is a little bit about that. And then this is a project I was able to work on the West Coast. I've been lucky to do several interpretive signage projects that I've really loved. If you're someone who goes to parks and actually reads the signs in the parks, thank you. There are actual people that work on that and do those things. So yeah, really, really grateful for any of you guys who appreciate signage that happens to be out in the world. I feel like whenever I go to a park, I look at the signage, it's usually got graffiti on it, or it's damaged somehow, or like, I'm always like, oh, that's so sad. I wonder how long this has been here. And I wonder how long it looked like the day it was installed before it got destroyed. I think we're very lucky in Nantucket for the most part. The interpretive signage that we have on island is largely untouched. At least I've noticed that in my meanderings around the trails and in those public spaces. But yeah, so I work with a couple different companies that actually the signage is graffiti proof, technically to 10 years or something like this. And I haven't personally tested it. But that is something that we have to think about when we make beautiful things and put them out in the world. Unfortunately, but it's also just part of the design challenge. It's like, okay, how do we create these things and how do they withstand the environments that we're going to put them in, natural or human or both? And so, yeah, this is an example of that. This is a sign that predominantly its purpose was to share access to the California Coastal Trail, which was benefit to the California Coastal Commission. This is a trail through some private property. So the private property owner was required to display this sign so that public users would know where they could go to access the coast, because that's something that's very important too. I think all of us who live with access to natural spaces is we want to be able to access those spaces, even though there might be private land ownership that could be otherwise a barrier to access to that. So yeah, that was kind of exciting in that way, that it's hopefully this helpful element that says, hey, you can park here, you can access a bathroom here, you can use a picnic table here, there's an overlook here. And oh, by the way, like there's all these little unique elements and things you can learn about the space while you're encountering it. So it's really dual purpose. This is an interpretive signage project that I still look back on as one of my most favorite projects that I've gotten to do with the Natural Resources Department. Tara Riley and Leah Hill were very kind to, Leah Hill were very kind to involve me in creating some signage for the Nantucket Natural Resources Department Shellfish Hatchery down at Brant Point Shellfish Hatchery. It's a very long name. I always mix up which goes first. Yeah, so we wanted to create an experience for users to be able to encounter the interior of the space and learn something about what was happening inside of these tanks and all throughout their various hatchery systems that are working. And the other barrier we wanted to overcome was that someone might be able to walk through the building and not necessarily have to have someone talking at them for them to understand what was going on. I think they've done an incredible job at hosting tours. Actually, a lot of the staff, the natural resources staff, has been incredible, and they're given their time to walking people through the space and sharing the signage. So it's been fun to help them navigate that. Just how do we encourage the schools and the general public to be able to enjoy these spaces and learn something about them. So I really enjoyed creating these visual components that portray what was happening there. And this required a ton of research as well. So just whether it was general history of of shellfishing on Nantucket, or just how their various hatchery systems functioned, how the tanks functioned. So much of design is research, is really taking time to understand the environment that you're in. And I think I'm very blessed because innately, having spent time in natural spaces, I feel like I was able to gain this awareness that, oh yeah, like everything is connected, right? Like there's kind of no way to truly separate almost everything that we do. So it's very daunting sometimes when you're creating visuals or information. Like where do you stop? Where do you not, what information do you not provide? And then that also opens the question of like, whose story or what narratives are you leaving out if it's not there in the signage? So I think as storytellers and designers, we have an immense responsibility to do that research really thoughtfully and incorporate as much of the stories as we can, and also ask those questions ourselves, like, okay, what is relevant, and who's been here before, and whose story is not being told in this work, and like, is that therefore a disservice to someone who is going to learn something about what this is meant to say? So yeah, that's kind of a tangent, but that's something that I really think about in my work. And I take very, very seriously. I take very, very serious ownership over the stories that my work is being used to tell. Because I think it should be. I think that we should really be considerate of the stories that we're telling, and the space that we're creating, for who and for what. So this is a close-up of this. You can actually, if you're on Nantucket, you can go and see this if you haven't seen it. It's the timeline that we created to share history of shellfishing on Nantucket, and it's outside of the hatchery. So it's one of the signs that you can access without having to actually go inside, which is great. And I was very grateful to the Nantucket Nantucket Historical Association, NHA. They gave us access to their historical photo archives. You can actually just go on their website and look through all of this if you're curious. Most cities, towns, municipalities will have libraries of old photographs, and that's a really, really fun way to learn about a space. You can actually go and access for free all these photos of different places, and they'll be archived and libraried very carefully, and so you can use certain keywords to search for different things. And maybe not everyone here is a total nerd like I am, but that is a nerdy thing that I do, is I will go and be like, let me learn about the history of this place by trying to find different photographs of this and that and whatnot. So yeah, that was a fun component of this project, was going through historical photographic archives and being like, okay, who and how and where and what has been involved with shellfishing. And then of course we didn't have there are the existence of the indigenous Wampanoag people, who are the original stewards of the land around Nantucket, Cape and the Islands. There is not photographic record that goes back as far as their existence. So we have an illustration down at the bottom left that illustrates a shell midden, which is essentially a waste area, or like a trash area where a lot of shells and bones and things would get discarded. And that is how we've been able to study existence of Wampanoag people on Nantucket, is uncovering these areas where there's a high volume of discarded shells and bones and things. And so that is a way that I tried to incorporate the existence of that history. And technically, like, this was a real time scale. That whole portion of the sign would be like 10 times as long and 10 times more loaded with information. But these are the challenges we have as designers: is how do we designate representation, and how do we represent stories, but get as much information as we can onto something. So yeah, I really value having access to a lot of feedback and a lot of smart people, because that helps me answer those questions, or navigate those challenges, or sometimes you make those decisions that way. So yeah, this is a few more images of the inside of that. We have we made little signs that can go on all different areas and be moved around. So that was another design challenge, is okay, want to show all these different processes, but all these processes might move around within this building. So how do we create an exhibit that moves with it? So a lot of these signs are very small. You can actually pick them up and move them around. And then they have a special little bracket that allows them to be moved easily as well. And the bottom left is just, I think icons are my love language. Anyone who's a designer here might have something to say about that, but I really love little miniature pictures of things that kind of help pull out what the thesis of something might be. So this is a little illustration that shows habitat monitoring, and so that's an acoustic device underneath a ship, and then it's a diver doing physical surveys of a space, which is a big part of what the Natural Resources Department does. So I love that little picture to illustrate that. This is another local Nantucket project that I was very lucky to work on. Similar vein of interest, oysters. The Natural Resources Department, the Land Bank, the Land Council, Girl Scouts of America, and Mass Oyster Project all collaborated on a project that was spearheaded through a local Girl Scout, Carly Ray. I don't know, Carly, if you're on here, hello. Thank you for involving me in this project. But Carly received a grant to work on this project and create an oyster upweller, which is a tank that houses live oysters and kind of allows them to grow and get bigger. And this tank is right downtown by the harbor launch. And so it's in a very public place, but you might not quite be able to see really clearly what's in the tank because there's quite a bit of condensation on the clear screen that actually allows you to peer into it. So this sign was meant to be an accompaniment to the tank so that folks could stumble upon this bubbling, exciting little piece of marine architecture in the downtown area and be like, well, I don't know what that is, but I can read about it right here. So this was a really fun project to be able to share how the importance of oyster reef restoration, some history about oyster reef decline, and then how oysters can get restored. And in addition to that, how that tank actually functions and what's going on inside of that tank and how does the seawater flow throughout that tank. Yeah, so that, and then this is a sample of some of the illustrations that are on there. Again, we've got some icons on the right. Some of my favorites. I love to work on those. They're a really fun little exercise. But I'll end with, you can see that there's a really clear visual language here. Like there's a consistency in the colors and the line types and everything so that it all reads together. So I feel like that's another part of what I do is like creating a brand or a visual consistency so that everything talks to each other and works seamlessly. And you can see that if I back up and I go back to the work I did here for this project, we did the logo, and then there's actually the colors of the logo incorporated into the background of these pages. So little nuances and things like that, and then coming up with this six colorway scheme, and then using each of those colors in these social media posts. So many different ways of using color and imagery to create a cohesive language. And I feel like that's one of the most important components of creating work that's really successful and really actually easier to interact with because you develop familiarity with certain things and your brain doesn't get jostled around being like, oh, well, wait, why is that font different from the one over there? There's a lot of communication out there that I see where I'm like, oh, if this was all just if this all had a similar language, it would be so much less overwhelming and easier to interact with. So that's something that I try to focus on in my work as well, as really simplifying things, paring them down and trying to create a cohesive visual language so that it's just easier to interact with, or as easy to interact with as possible. So I've talked for about half an hour and I hope not too quickly. But that's most of my presentation. I'd really love to open it up to any thoughts or questions or comments or perspectives anyone who's joining us has to share.
Thank you so much, Morgan. Thank you for that journey. And just as a reminder for everyone at home, if you have any questions at all, you are definitely welcome to pop them into the chat or the Q&A box. And if anyone would love to verbally interact with Morgan this evening, we welcome it. Please pop your name into the chat box, or you can raise your hand and I can give you the microphone with speaking permission. And while we wait to see what questions circle in everyone's brains, I have a question for you. How do you balance creativity with the need for accuracy and authenticity when you're interpreting historical or ecological or even scientific themes?
Oh, so many ways, and the best answer I have for that and most consistent, I think, is mentorship and peer editing. I think being able to lean on, like I said previously, working, I am an independent designer, but I always have a team of people who I'm collaborating with. And so I do a lot of the front end consideration of those mechanics, like, okay, how do I want to express this creatively? I will do a lot of that myself, but then I will absolutely be sharing it with either the people I'm working with or a bunch of my friends who are like either subject familiar or actually subject blind. I love texting or just like sending quick snippets of things to my friends who I know might not be experts in the subject, because I'm not either. And so it's kind of nice to be like, okay, if you have never heard of this before, what is your first impression on what this is and how this looks? And like, how does this make you feel? Is this easy to understand, or how does this look like? So thank you to everyone in my life and all of my partners and everyone I've worked with for being those people who keep me sane and help me make good on those decisions. Yeah, I'm very grateful to everyone around me, because that's how collaboratively, I think the best answers to questions that we can come up with are the ones that we arrive on collaboratively, especially when it comes to creating work that can be so impactful, right? And like influence the thoughts someone might have about something they've never learned about before. That's a super intense responsibility to have. So yeah, I hope I'm doing it correctly.
Because it's always work for a diverse audience.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
What would you say are some key skills or experiences that have been crucial or essential to your success as a designer in this sphere?
Oh, I'm so sorry. Will you repeat the question?
What would you say are some key skills or even some transferable skills and experiences that have been really crucial or essential to your success as a designer focused on this sphere of scientific communication, visual communication, and so forth?
Ooh, key skills. Like, I think just being very open-minded. I think first of all, like being willing to listen to anybody, open to all kinds of perspectives, and being a good observer and a good listener. I feel like you can be a talented designer, but 90% of what I do is collaborating with other people, is just being in a room with other people, whether it's physical or virtual, and problem solving collaboratively. So like collaborative problem solving skills will take you so far. I'm incredibly grateful to have, I think, first experienced that as a child, I guess, having siblings. Thank you, Emma and Bailey, and having friends growing up, solving problems. But yeah, being able to interact with others in a really productive manner is I think the best skill. I think design can be learned. Learning how to design something, how to make something look good, you can learn how to do that easy. Like watch YouTube. That's how I learned plenty in college, but I am like a YouTube, like most of what I know how to do, I'm like self-taught in the most random. So yeah, but I don't know how much YouTube can teach you about being a patient, collaborative person. So take those opportunities to learn from the people around you, and it'll take you very far.
Well, thank you, Morgan. We have a question from Christopher. This has been very cool. How do you go about targeting new projects? Do you seek them out? Are there sites you visit looking for your kind of expertise?
Yeah, let's see. Meaningful. What's a good way to put this? sustainable stocking, maybe. Like I honestly, like I just read a great piece written about a friend of mine who's also an artist who's opening a show in Newport. And she said that the best advice she ever got was to just go to everything, be everywhere, like go to all the shows, just interact with as many people as you can. And so like, yeah, I cold call, I cold email, I cold call, I reach out, I have met so many great friends by like meeting people on Instagram and being like, hey, I really like your work. Like, can we chat? Or like, what's upcoming? Like, can I come meet you? So, yeah, that sounds potentially problematic, but honestly, just like being open to making new connections. Yeah, that's honestly, I feel like how I've gotten to work on some of the projects I'm most proud of, just by being a good self-advocate and like not being afraid to put your foot in the door.
Right. And it sounds like immersion's a huge part of that process too. And exposure to different types of media, different types of people. What are they creating? What's important to them?
Yeah. Yeah. Just yes, definitely ask people what they're doing, learn from other people, and just, yeah, don't be afraid to take those opportunities to just go be in the room. You don't have to ask any questions or like interact. You don't even have to just be a fly on the wall, but
Yeah.
fly on the wall. Yeah, it does a lot. Thank you, Chris.
Anonymous attendee, did you ever think your creative passions would have led to a successful career path like this? Good question.
Well, in full transparency, I'm still working on the successful career path, because let me tell you what, this it is a slog. It's like all the projects I've shared, it looks beautiful and glamorous, but like 90% of it is no glamour or glitz. So yeah, let me make sure I'm answering the question properly. I did, and I do. I think the best way is to just like believe. Yeah, you got to believe in yourself. You got to be like, I can do it, because there's so much out there. There's so much noise that's like, the market's saturated. There's someone already doing what you like to do.
Right.
But like those are the reality is there's so much space out there for beautiful and thoughtful work. And like no matter what it looks like, no matter what negative little thoughts you can have in your head, those will always be there. But there will always be a space for you if you want to do meaningful work. And that is what I tell myself every day in this attempt to maintain this career. Yeah. So I have to keep at it, keep my head up, and keep looking for opportunities and stay positive. Yeah. But yes, you can do it.
And how do you keep on top of the latest design technology?
There's a lot out there. There's a car alarm. Can you hear that? Nope.
No.
Um, gosh, oof. You can really go down a rabbit hole. I just follow a lot of, I read a lot. I keep my ears and eyes open for all kinds of different new and exciting things that are being done. Yeah, I think new technology is just as important as like these movements that are happening within the industry as well, like these interests that we collectively have and different subject matter. And so like part of that changing, shifting perspective or available toolkit that is out there is like not just the hard technology and like, oh, can I learn how to animate this thing in this new way in After Effects? Like it's also, okay, what's the industry doing? What are people talking about? How can I respond or interact with these new ideas that are happening? And so I think that both of those things are just as important. Staying on top of new tech and being aware of what's kind of glitzy and exciting in the moment, but also like what are people talking about and how can I be part of that conversation, because that's shifting all the time too. How we think about things, like we are unlearning and relearning and expanding our perspectives about so many things at this time. And so I feel like both of those things, that I can't answer that question without mentioning that too.
And on that topic of latest design technology, where do you see AI, since that is like all of the buzz and blitz right now, where do you see AI really not just taking over the space, but how can it complement or enhance the work that you do, if it can, in your opinion?
How can I enhance the work that I do with AI? Yeah. Oh, yeah. So AI, guess so many different answers to the question.
Mm-hmm.
So I love what AI is doing in terms of like how it's making things like writing a resume really accessible to people who like
Mm-hmm.
did not have formal background or did not previously have access to doing something like that. Um, I think that there's totally both beneficial and very problematic space with AI. Like, do I hate that something I've put on my own website might somehow be getting used to like inform a bot how to create something beautiful that someone just pressed a button to make? Like, yeah. Is there
Yep.
anything I can do about it? I don't know. Like, it's something I'm trying to educate myself on more,
Mm-hmm.
honestly, how I might be able to interact with that space meaningfully, whether I want to use it in my own work or not. I mean, I think there's like a generative fill tool now that Photoshop and Adobe offers that I
Right.
think is quite cool. I think Adobe's version of that is somewhat license sensitive, meaning I think it does a better job at not using
Mm-hmm.
licensed work or not thieving work that it's not supposed to.
Mm-hmm.
I need to educate myself more on that. But sometimes like I will experiment with my own work. I'll be like, ooh, I took this photo, but it's like this, and I need it to be like this. Like, can I use the generative fill tool to like make it
Right.
like, yes, I can. And so there's things like that that I'll experiment with. But like if I ask it to put a shark in a photo of a turtle that I've taken and be like, oh, put a shark up here. No,
Yeah.
not so good at that yet. It's gonna get there. And then it's a relationship too, which is the craziest part. You're like the prompting, the writing of the uh, intervention you want it to make to the
Right.
photograph, like the part of it too. And then it's on you because you got to be a good prompter. But then
Mm-hmm.
there's also this whole like you can use it to create its own prompts. So yeah, it's a rabbit hole. That's a
It
long,
really is.
real big rabbit hole. Is my answer to that.
I think that there's potential for there to be room for it to inform design,
Oh
but
yeah,
I question again the design ethics
yeah,
piece of, the thievery or the borrowing of people's work and, not giving credit for it. So I think it's a double-edged sword that there is potential for it to be beneficial in some realms. Potentially, I'm a scientist, not an artist. Um, but I do worry about how that information is used and shared as well.
yeah. I do too. I'm also concerned about it. I think everyone should be. I think with
Yeah,
any technology like that, it's like don't take anything at face value. Like this thing's
right.
super cool and exciting and allows you to do something quickly, but like be considerate of what the impacts are of your use of that tool. And that can be said for everything.
And to your point, it's a responsibility to educate ourselves on how these tools, like, yes, they are impactful, but what are potentially the cons and the downsides to them, benefiting one individual person in this, quick turnaround time frame. So, anonymous attendee shared, you are so good at presenting. How much do you do, and do you enjoy making presentations?
It's very, very kind. Thank you, anonymous attendee, for those very kind words. I don't do a lot of presenting. It does scare the living daylights out of me. So thank you for that positive feedback, but I'm hoping to do more of it. And yeah, I do enjoy putting these things together. I think it's inherently easy to talk about yourself. So thank you. I hope everyone who's here enjoyed my long-winded explanation of my life experience. But yeah, yeah, no, I think that presenting is an important skill, and I'm working on that too.
I love that. I have a couple more questions for you
Sure.
because I'm just so fascinated.
Great.
How do you ensure that your visuals are both engaging and accessible? And I know you touched on this a little bit, but can you share a little bit more about how do you ensure they're both engaging and accessible to non-experts without oversimplifying the content that you're responsible for sharing?
Hmm. Love that. Great question. Thank you. That's totally, yeah, that's what keeps me awake at night. I'm like, okay,
Mhm.
how do I take this idea and make it simple enough for someone who's not an industry expert to understand? I think it's helpful that that person is usually me, right? Like I said, like I have the benefit of I am very very, very lucky. I have an incredible education and I have a great awareness for a lot of things, but I'm by no means, I'm curious. I'm a super curious person. So I'm always interested in things, but I'm not an expert in pretty much every other subject that I get to touch with my work. So yeah, I think it's leaning on the experts I'm working with and being like, hey, does this accurately portray the work you're doing? And I think what I have done is just continued to water down the concept, and then like I'll let them catch me and be like, okay, no, this is like, that's an oversimplification, or
Mhm.
and there's nuance in everything, right? So like when you oversimplify something, you inherently remove a lot of nuance. And that's, as academics or experts, you want to keep that in there because
Mhm.
that's how we maintain our groundedness as like everything's connected. And so you don't want to oversimplify things to remove that perspective that everything's connected. But then you also have to resign yourself to be like, you know what? There's only so much I can add in here, and I have to get these ideas across. And it's better for me to create something that's informative, but not too scary or too opaque or too dense, so that someone still actually reads the thing, right? Like, or
Mhm.
interacts with it. So yeah, it's again, a collaborative process, for sure. And like at some point, you just have to put the pencil down because nothing is inherently perfectly perfect. Like I've gone back to work I've done 5 years ago, and I'm like, ah, I wish I'd written that differently, but
Right.
that's how it is. We have to evolve. And I think that's
Yep.
how all of our other like ways that we inform ourselves works. Like you read a news article these days and the end of it, it says, oh, this is edited 3 minutes ago. Like this has been
Mhm.
updated. So it's like, we're always running an update. We're never going to stop running an update, and that's okay too. I think it's okay for me to be like, all right, that's a piece of history now, and there might
Mhm.
be some updated information to it, and if I can't change it, that's there's something that's a little bit okay with that.
And with your work that you produce for different organizations, let's say that, there is an update to the scientific information, for instance. Is that something that you would go back to those clients and say, hey, this has changed, this, was brought to my attention. Is this something that we should revisit? Do you feel like that is well received by your clients? Is it something that they'd be amenable to, or is it something that people are like, oh no, well, we budgeted for this project, for instance, and can't really work on that right now? Like, what is your stance? What has been your experience with any situations like that, if you've had any?
I haven't yet had that particular situation arise.
Mhm.
So I can't really
I-
say, like, I can only come up with hypotheticals.
Yeah.
And what I can say in my experience is that like largely the biggest barrier is funding, right? Because like
Mhm.
to spend the money to remake the sign or do the thing. So um,
Mhm.
I think that's just where it's very important to have a holistic understanding of the things that you're making and you're putting out in the world. And then potentially just, I am kind of, the way I create my work is in preparedness for that scenario. So I try to create work that can stand on its own for as long as
Mhm.
it possibly can, um, with that understanding that like, yes, new information, we learn new things every day, everything's
Right.
constantly changing. But I try my darndest to future proof things, or at least make things that are going to be relevant um,
Mhm.
through long periods of time. I mean, we have lots of books that we find still relevant, but the book doesn't exist by itself, right? So like this is the cool thing.
Right.
The sign is there, and maybe it's not, maybe in a few years there's something
Mhm.
about it that's different, but that information also exists elsewhere and can inform an
Right.
update on the sign. So the sign's not by itself, or the
Right.
thing I'm making never exists in total isolation. And so it's like
Yes.
you can use that thing that I made to be like, oh, there's been a change here. What is that change? Like, what is the new information? So I guess that's a holistic way of thinking about it, but
I love that. And I'm glad that you do design with that preparedness in mind. I think that that's important for viewers and anyone interested in your work to understand as well. Anonymous attendee, in terms of continuing education, have you taken any courses that you have found particularly helpful?
yes. Yes, I have a certificate in science communication from UCSD Extension, which I that was so fun. That was like such a fun process because it was virtual, which was great. It was during the pandemic. So it was a little bit interesting because it was hard to go out in the world, like visit places that I wanted to write about. It was writing specific. So, but I made a lot of great connections and got to meet and talk with lots of amazingly interesting people who were studying or looking at or inquiring about all these different things that I wasn't at all. And so it was a cool way of getting to experience the world and what other people were doing, and then evaluate each other's work and learn to write about science or scientific ideas in a way that, like, again, translates that expert point of view to like a general audience. So that was fabulous. I loved doing that. And yeah, I hope to take more courses. I haven't taken any formal courses in like mechanics of design, like how to use certain programs or whatnot. I will admittedly use YouTube for that, and I'm sorry for anyone who thinks that's
Sorry.
offensive. But like, yeah, I have not been able to invest in that experience for myself, other than just like quick tutorials and things like that. And I also enjoy the process of learning, and I've also learned from a lot of peers and people I've worked with. Been very lucky to work with some very smart people who have kind of given me tips and tricks along the way. So yeah, always keep your ears open for what people around you have to teach you.
Be a sponge.
Be a sponge. Yeah.
Be a sponge.
Be a sponge.
I have definitely 2 more questions for you if people aren't asking. So what question did I want to ask you first? Because I'll wrap with the other one. How do you handle ethical considerations, such as the potential for visuals to miscommunicate or misrepresent information? Do you have contingencies for that? Or how does that fit into your design process?
Again, preventative approach. Like, I do my very, very best to research the living everything out of everything that I'm like. I really try to go deep, or if I try to be really, really curious. Like, if something there's a story that's being told and I'm like, oh, like, okay, that's cool. We're talking about this time scale. And then I'm like, well, what about if we look at it like this big picture, like what's happened there, like what's happened there. And yeah, I think that fortunately there's a collective movement in science communication to do a much better job of not leaving out narratives that are particularly, and diverse perspectives that are very, very critical to telling those stories, and very, very important in making those stories what they are, and making them really meaningful. So I think that's helpful because there's a collective awareness about that component, like the ethics, who's in the room, who's not in the room, like who's in this piece of information, who's not. So I think that's something that I'm fortunate that a lot of the people I work with feel the same way or have that same curiosity. And so there's a desire to be really aware and be really thoughtful about what's being communicated and how. Um, so yeah, that's how I navigate that, just to be as curious as possible, and but also compassionate with myself, and that like things get missed, like and that can happen, and that's not there's just, with that comes ownership to own up to it or fix it or figure out what to do with that moving forward. But I'd like to believe that I get to catch a lot of that on the front end, due to an innate understanding that if you're reading about something, there's something that's always not there. And so
Right.
trying to think about what's not there is as important as what is. So yeah.
And it sounds like you have that awareness and that sensitivity to the topic as well, because what I'm understanding is like you zoom all the way out in order to focus in on what it is you're responsible for sharing with the
Yeah.
public.
Yes.
And
It's
that
like,
comes with a realm of sensitivity, a realm of awareness that one must have to be able to communicate that effectively.
yes. Yeah. I hope that, yeah, that's one of the parts of my work that I take very, very seriously. So I hope that is.
Like it definitely shows. And what advice would you give to any budding or aspiring young designers, scientific communicators, anyone who's looking to specialize in visual design or scientific communication?
Just keep doing it, whatever you're doing in the wee hours in the night or morning or whatever, like whatever you're doing in your free time, like whatever ignites that spark in you to do more of the thing, like just pay attention to it. and lean in and trust that like someone somewhere will be like, that's cool. Let's keep going with that. Let's like, and it's not a clean, linear, nice process. It's like a big all over like this. You just got to keep that.
Spiral.
You just gotta stick with it and trust whatever the thing is that you love the most. Because other people will come to see that too. And I think that will ultimately cement the thing and being something you can latch onto as a professional means of existence. But I don't know. Also, like there's a lot to be said for being a creative person or having those creative interests and doing something maybe in like your 9 to 5 that's maybe not totally that exact thing, but allows you the space and energy to focus on that, especially when you're young. So yeah, take every opportunity for what it is, and it's okay if you're not like an independent designer right off the bat. Like that's so rarely happens, and like none of us do it without help and without support, like intense support from mentors or other people in our lives. And so yeah, it's really okay to like do something that's not the thing that you want to do and learn from those experiences. And yeah, really okay, really great, honestly, great
And
experience.
transfer those skills into your creative process.
Exactly. Yes. And transfer the business skills, like working for a big company can be the most incredible experience in problem solving and collaboration and just observation, how things function. So yeah, lots of ways to do what you want to do. And it shouldn't look like and the way anyone else has gone about it, because you're you.
That is fair. I love how the work that you are doing, it really, in my opinion, it really reflects the mission of Mariah Mitchell Association. One, the learning by doing. It's very evident in your work and in your creative process and style, as well as like having that passion, that curiosity, that willingness to just be a sponge and learn and absorb from everyone around you, because that's something that Mariah did in her time. She's most, known for being a female astronomer, a female American astronomer, but she was also a naturalist. She spent a lot of time in nature. She spent a lot of time communicating with abolitionists, with just different people in her community, with artists, just in different spheres. She just kept her brain and her entire being just open to receiving information. And I love the marriage and the parallel between the work that you're doing and how you view the world, Morgan. It really lines up for me, the work that we do here and the work that you're doing. So I just wanted to say thank you from the bottom of my heart for being someone that appreciates being a sponge in the world and showing people around you how you can marry all of these different disciplines. And while you may not be a scientific expert, you can still work and hold your own with scientists and play such a crucial role in the scientific field. So you don't have to be a scientist per se. I always say, and you remember from us teaching kids, everyone's a mathematician, everyone's a scientist, everyone's an artist. And I need to also stop telling myself that I'm not a creative person. My creativity just looks different.
Everyone is a creative person.
Exactly.
Everyone can creatively problem solve.
So I am really grateful to, see people in spheres and in spaces that hold paradox to be true and show the intersectionality of all of these different disciplines. And the more that you can keep, reaching back and showing someone else this path forward is just my only request to you as your friend and as a person in the world.
Very kind. Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm grateful to be
Any
here.
question I haven't asked you that you wish I asked you or should have asked you before we wrap this evening?
Oh, is there one more? Oh, so
Someone just snuck in there. Love that.
Thank
Oh,
you.
Nancy, you're so very welcome. She says, thank you, Morgan and Chanel.
No, I feel like we've covered a lot of ground. I'm really grateful for all the questions everyone else answered or everyone else put forth. And yeah, I hope that everyone enjoyed and took something away from this. And yeah, I reach out to Janelle if you want to get a hold of me and chat further. Like I love chatting with fellow creatives and talking shop or not, talking life. Yeah, so feel free to reach out.
and we look forward to you coming home to Nantucket, hopefully soon and definitely next year when we have some more creatives, especially our interns who summer with us. I'm sure that, you would be such a great resource to be able to interact with them and serve as a mentor in some capacity. I'd love to have you in that role. So,
Thank you.
of course. Well, everyone, thank you for joining us this evening. Again, a special thank you to Morgan Raith for her wonderful presentation this evening and sharing about her creative process as well as her work and her portfolio with us. And a special thank you again to Bank of America for making presentations like our Science Speaker Series program available and accessible to learners of all ages. And with that, that concludes our October Science Speaker Series. Morgan, thank you, thank you, thank you. If you want to hang back, I'm going to kick everyone out. But before I do, hi, Josephine. I had to say hi to Josephine.
Hi. Hi,
And
Jessica.
anonymous attendee said, thank you.
Thank you, all the anonymous attendees, for your beautiful question. Thank you.
All right, everyone. Thank you. Thank you again.